Welcome to Conversations, Lehman College's new series of discussions with major theater artists of our times. This is the first of a two-part series with LANFORD Wilson, who is my old friend and our guest for today, a distinguished playwright and actually my inspiration as a playwright. That's the plain truth. I'm going to read your list of credits because they're so voluminous. I'm going to read some of them anyway. LANFORD is author of Balm in Gilead, The Rhymers of Eldridge, 5th of July, Redwood Curtain, Trinity, Sympathetic Magic, Book of Days, Tally's Folly, his version of Summer and Smoke. He's received awards from every quarter, including the Brandeis Creative Arts Award, the Edward Albee Last Frontier Award, the John Steinbeck Award, the Institute of Arts and Letters Award, the Drama Desk Award, the Dramalogue Award, 2 Drama Critic Awards, 3 Obies, and a 4th Obie for sustained achievement, and the Pulitzer Prize for Drama for Tally's Follies. I want you all to welcome LANFORD Wilson. In this first conversation with LANFORD Wilson, we'll be focusing on your past, and in the second part, we'll talk about your present and your future. And
which threatens to be a very short episode. Yeah.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. I doubt it.
Okay, we'll see.
I think we met in 1912. I mean, 1963.
62 or 3, 60, maybe 63. Yeah.
You had just come to New York, and I was working in book publishing, and I was living at the time with John Coriano, and he mentioned to you, since you were an up-and-coming young playwright, the Cafe Chino. For our audience who may not know this, John is a distinguished professor of music here at Lehman College. So there's a very interesting connection between Lehman and LANFORD Wilson at the moment. What were you doing when, before you got to New York? Where were you? Where were you born? What were you doing?
I was originally from Missouri, and as soon as I was 18 and graduated from high school, my mother said, "There's absolutely nothing for you in this town. Get out of here." And that was Ozark, Missouri, population about 3,000. And she was right. There wasn't anything for me. And at the same time, my parents had separated when I was 5. And I hadn't heard from my father except maybe once in that time. And he called and said, "Come out to California," where he'd been living with his second wife and two half-brothers of mine. Turned out I adored the stepmother, adored both my half-brothers, and didn't get along with my father at all, but I did go out there. And so I actually started school. I had done one term at Southwest Missouri State in Springfield, and then started at San Diego State. That's where he was living. He was living in El Cajon, which is a suburb of San Diego.
Somehow I remember that you were in Chicago prior to.
I did 1 year at San Diego State and 1 year at the Ryan Aeronautical, in other words, Ryan Aircraft Factory, and riveting airplanes. No one ever believes that. I was working on the KC-135, which is that plane that flies over the other planes and fuels them. It's a refueling plane.
And you were riveting.
I was working on the fuselage of that plane, yeah. I was very good with my art background. I could read blueprints. I was one of the only persons on the field that could read blueprints. But anyway, that was a year, and I had it with home. I'd had it with the aircraft factory, and I'd had it with that college. And I took a vacation and never came back. I went to Chicago to see friends of mine who had. No one, as it turns out, stays in Ozark. And a couple of my close friends were in Chicago, so I went to see them and lived in Chicago for the next 5 years. I went there for a week, but I tended to stay.
And you came to New York.
Well, I was working in advertising. I'd always thought I was going to be an artist, either a graphic designer or a painter. I would have taken either one. And my heroes were Saul Bass and Matisse. And
I remember you were a wonderful artist. You are a wonderful artist. You used to do your own posters.
I was then, yeah. I did my own posters. I used to say I only wrote plays so I could do my posters. But I was working at an advertising agency, and I was writing stories, and on my lunch break, I don't know why, I guess I thought it would support I would send them off and make a lot of money, and it would support my art habit. And, and I thought of, all my life, you have to understand, all my life I was going to be a painter or a graphic designer. And that was the only thing I'd ever thought about. I'd been in a couple of plays in high school, and one in college, but they meant nothing to me. You know, it was just, it was nothing. And one day I thought of a story, and I said, oh, that's more of a play than it is a story. And I'd been reading plays, I don't know why, but I've been reading plays and had a good facility for reading plays. I only found out later that a lot of people can't read plays, but it was very easy for me. Anyway, I got 2 pages into the story and said, as a play, and said, I'm a playwright. It was as clear as day. It was just lightning out of the sky. It was as clear as day that that's what I was supposed to do.
Do you still have that play?
No, it was god-awful. I sent it to friends of mine, and they said, you've got to be kidding. But it didn't matter. I knew that that's what I was supposed to do. I'll tell you how bad it was. It was called This Dreamer Cometh. As I recall, that's from the Bible somewhere. But no, I finished the play. I sent it off to a wonderful woman from San Diego who had been sort of my mentor there, Laverne Brown. And she wrote me the most wonderful note. She said, I am so proud of you for finishing this. But I really had. I'd written 110 pages and finished it. And it was the only large thing I'd ever finished. Maybe she knew that. And so I went to the downtown center of the University of Chicago and learned at least what exit meant and you know, what was stage right and stage left. And after that, at the time, it sounds strange to say this because now Chicago has such a thriving theater center, or is such a thriving theater center. But at the time, there was no original theater in Chicago at all. And unfortunately, that's where I was living, so I came to New York. Robert Patrick wrote a play. I wrote a story called I Came to New York to Write.
Right.
Maybe it's a play. Well, I came to New York to write.
Well, that's when I met you.
Yeah. Right away. I mean,
right
within
away.
the first 2 weeks that I was in New York.
Right. You were really a greenhorn here. And,
Yeah.
and I was, a personal note here, I was working in book publishing, not a writer. I was a poet at the time.
Yeah.
And not a particularly good one, but I
yes,
was
you
writing
were.
poetry. And Lanford, you started to write at the what is now legendary Cafe Chino. There are all kinds of books on this subject that have come out.
Yeah.
Which is a little place in the village that did plays. And you became the first prominent playwright at the Cafe Chino with a number of your plays. And your success there inspired me to write. I wrote the short
I did
story.
know that, yeah.
Yeah, I wrote a short story called Good Night, I Love You, which was all in dialogue, because all my friends at this point were playwrights.
We're actors and playwrights, yeah.
And so you told me it was a play.
Right.
And so I rearranged it as a play, and poof, I was a playwright. So
yeah, and it was put on within days,
and you were
as things were at
responsible
the
for my
Cafe Chino.
entire career.
That's great.
I have a check for 10% in my pocket.
Excellent.
I wanted to thank you, Lanford.
Yeah, I certainly am glad you.
And I was, I really ran away with the circus there. And we all became a circus at the Cafe Chino.
Oh, definitely.
And you were the star attraction. And
if the Chino had gotten the recognition that it deserved 2 years earlier, Doric Wilson would have been the first
Right.
recognized
Another Wilson.
playwright from there. Yeah, another Wilson.
Wilson.
Because he was really excellent. But his plays were revived, and then he was discovered. They were revived at the Chino 3 years after they'd been done originally.
Right.
Then he was discovered. But
Right.
so he had been the pioneer, really.
Now, you quickly started to do plays all over town, not only the Chino at La Mama, and your
One
name-
even at, yeah, one at the Judson Poets Theater.
Judson Poets
Terrible
Theater.
failure, but that's all right.
Your name quickly became associated as a director. The director Marshall Mason was associated with your work. He wasn't the only director you worked with. But when did you meet Marshall? Marshall Mason is an extraordinarily gifted director whom
Yeah, he's
both Lanford
incredible.
and I have worked with.
Yeah.
When did you meet Marshall?
Oh,
originally?
very briefly. I did Home Free at the Chino, and he had seen it, and I heard he had seen it. He was very famous at the Chino.
Right.
He was their hot director, but I hadn't seen anything he had done, and he hadn't done. He had recently gone off Broadway, so he had turned pro. So my God, you know, how much more famous can you get than being off Broadway with a huge flop? But still, everyone was very impressed with him, and I'd heard his name, and so I finally met him. And I met him, I rewritten Home Free. It had been done there once, and I did it again there in the rewrite. And I knew he'd seen the original. So I said, oh, hello, I've heard so much about you. And you saw the first Home Free. Don't you love what I've done with it? And he said, no, I think you've ruined it. That's the first thing he ever said to me. We became fast friends after that. I had written a play called Balm in Gilead, which was the only full-length play I'd written. It had 55 characters in it, and
55.
55 characters in it originally, and even even novice that I was, I realized that was a little too many to expect it to be. I think when I started writing it, I was really writing a novel in dialogue to be read, but it was all just dialogue. It would have been so incredibly confusing.
Can you tell us what it was about?
It's well, I was so astonished by where we had to live. We were in the poorest neighborhood in Manhattan, which was Needle Park at the time, and Needle Park because of heroin. Heroin was very big in the early '60s, and so it was where all the junkies and whores and prostitutes and hustlers hung out at the coffee house, the all-night coffee house that was just below our apartment. We were in, well, you walk down the hall from the apartment that I was in. There were 3 of us living in one room that was only a bedroom. There was no living room or anything. There was a bedroom. And you walk down the hall. You were very lucky if you didn't get a needle stuck in your foot on the way, because they were littered all over the halls. And looked out the window once, and there were 5 needles on the ledge before when you look. I was seeing what the weather was like. I certainly saw what the weather was like. But that was, so this was all amazing to me. I was astonished by this, and also a total neophyte in the drug scene. And so I would spend every night downstairs in the coffee house that where all of these people went, and it was amazing. And I had a notebook, and generally speaking, I was just taking dictation. Anything I heard, I wrote down, and then the next day, during the day, I would sort of reorganize that into some sort of design, and then the next night and it was almost, I didn't realize I was writing something. It was just something I was doing. It was almost a hobby, because I was so, well, or maybe I was trying to give myself an education and get up on all of the slang and what the hell was going on. Anyway, and there was a new girl in town, and then I thought I was the new girl in town, because I sure as hell didn't know any of the steps. And so I was writing a character named Darlene, who had just come from Chicago, as I had just come from Chicago, and her education on the place, which is really my education on the place. And I got all finished with the thing, and I said, you know what? I had written a long, I wanted to understand Darlene, so I'd written a long biography of her. And I said, if I made that, and I'd written it in dialogue as a long monologue. It was about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how fast or slow you do it. It's 15 to 20 minutes long. It's 15 minutes at the fastest speed.
An enormous length of time
Yeah,
in the
it
theater.
is. It's a very long time in the theater. When it was published, it was 4 solid blank pages without any interruption. It was gorgeous. It looked like a novel.
I
Anyway,
remember I
said,
copy edited that.
huh? Yeah, I know you
Everyone went
copy
in.
edited that. That was great. And you got it published, too.
Yeah.
It was the first book published from Off Broadway, and,
Right.
and you done it. It was published with 2 one-acts that I'd written.
Right. Lady
And-
Bright was in it.
Yeah. And Ludlow Fair, or Home Free, one of the... Anyway, the I realized that if I made an end to the first act, which wouldn't be very difficult, that monologue could go at the top of the second act, and I was within 4 pages of having a full-length play. And I'd certainly not written one before, and I hadn't intended this to be a play. I'd really intended it to be all... So it didn't bother me that there were 55 characters in it, 54, 55, because I wasn't going to have it produced anyway. So slyly, I thought if I cut this down to about 30, maybe I could get it done, which is, I began to combine characters. And there were characters in it, several characters, and they only had 1 line.
Well, whatever it was, it caused a sensation.
Yeah, well, it was pretty damn good when it...
It was wonderful. And it was also...
He
with
said
the,
modestly, right?
it was wonderful.
Yeah, it was, there were people, when it was revived, there were people who wouldn't go see the revival because they didn't want the original experience washed
There
away.
was quite a revival by Steppenwolf.
It was very damn good, yeah.
But to my mind, Marshall's stays in my mind too.
Oh
And-
yeah, it does mine also.
So
It was an astonishing experience. I mean, I went to Marshall and said, you know, read this, and he read it and said, said, you need a very good director. I thought that meant he hated it. What it meant was, I have to direct this. No one else, you know, everyone else is going to screw it up.
with
so
his usual modesty.
Yeah, and with his usual modesty, right. And it took a month before we got that straightened out, what we were talking about. And then we started, we got a date from Ellen Stewart at the La Mama and started casting. And my education was the casting process and the rehearsal process. My education into theater, because he had an incredible theater background and theater experience, and I had none. And just the field trips they went on, the rehearsal process they went on, I think changed my entire life, because I started writing for actors because I was so fascinated by their process and by the real work that they had to do. I started writing for actors after that, but I hadn't even thought about it until then.
Now, it was, how would you describe the style of Balm and Gilead?
Oh boy, I'm better leaving that to someone else. It was sort of a collage. It was
expressionistic collage.
Yeah, expressionistic collage. People turning from a mad scene, turning to the audience with short little speeches or jokes, or
It was,
there was a little song in it that John Coriolano wrote
Oh, that's
the
right.
music
I forgot.
for. Yeah.
I forgot about that.
I said it should go something like that. He said, no, it should go ba da da. Yeah. I went, oh, okay. Mind if we use that? And he said, just don't say I wrote it.
Well, later on in your collaboration with Marshall, the two of you became noted for a style called lyric, what do you call it? Lyric realism.
Neither one of us, I pray, had anything to do with that name, but it's
stuck.
not unwrong.
It stuck, and I remember I would describe earlier plays of yours, like Rhymers of Eldritch were almost in that style.
Right.
That you would have stabs of, it felt naturalistic, but it was very poetic.
Yeah, it was sort of elevated naturalistic or something like that.
And that became a noticeable style of the collaboration evening, of the collaboration, which later extended to your Broadway works.
Yeah, some of it, yeah.
How did that come about? How did you move from off-Broadway to Broadway? I'm talking about the founding of Circle Rep.
Let's see, yeah.
The legendary Circle
Yeah,
Rep.
legendary Circle Rep. Well, they were damn good. When we started Circle Rep, I wasn't really much of a part of it because I was having two plays. I mean, this is the week that we started Circle Rep. I was having two plays done. One that were brand new. One was called Lemon Sky. It was being premiered in Buffalo, and one was Serenading Louis, and it was being premiered in Washington D.C. I had written several plays, but I mean, and they had been done. But at the time, I gave Lemon Sky to. Did I say Lemon Sky, the other one? Yeah,
Yeah.
Anyway, that was in Buffalo. I gave Lemon Sky to Circle Rep, but at the time we wouldn't hire anyone outside of the company. There were about 30, 40 people in the company, and we didn't have anyone to play the father. We were all too young. And so then I let Buffalo do it. And so Buffalo was a big success, and Serenading Louis was a big success in Washington. No one there saw it. No one from New York saw it in Washington, but people did see the Lemon Sky in Buffalo, and they brought it into New York, where it bombed huge. There was everyone who was talking for the last 2 years. People, if anything, had a father-son in it. They were talking about the generation gap, and this was the last possible hour that you could print generation gap, the words generation gap, without everyone throwing up. And all of the reviews were, this is a generation gap play, and no one wanted to go near it. But they were all raves, and no one would go near it. So I went into a massive block, writer's block, and I was helping around Circle Rep. I was, they were doing other plays, and I was taking tickets and showing people their seats and anything. And a couple of kids were doing plays of mine in the workshop. We had a lab that continued through the whole history of Circle Rep, that anyone who wanted to do anything, they did Ludlow Fair. Conchata Ferrell and Trish Hawkins, and blew me away. And so I decided I should write something for the whole company. They did 3 one-acts of mine. And I said, yeah, but they'd been done. I didn't write them for the company, but I was in the middle of this massive block. So the third play I wrote for them, the third play of the 3 one-acts that they did, they were only going to do 2. And I said, no, it only uses 4 people, and there are 30 people in the company. So I wrote a very short play that used 15 people. It was around very much like Rhymers of Eldridge and that sort of thing, called The Family Continues.
Right.
I really liked that play. God knows no one's done it since.
That's 15.
Yeah. 15 characters, 15 minutes long, maybe 20. And, but you know what? I hadn't written a word in 2 years. And suddenly I just wrote this play so they'd have more people on stage at one point, because they had 30 people in the company, and suddenly it's all right, 20 minutes long, but it was a play.
So that trickle became a torrent.
Yeah, it really did. I didn't stop. I mean, you had to stomp me to stop that thing.
And these plays moved to Broadway. Some of them.
Well, Hot L was the first one to move Broadway from off-Broadway to off-Broadway, and then the next one, which was 5th of July maybe. I don't remember. Maybe 5th of July went to Broadway, and then from then on, they all went to Broadway without stopping. All except the 3 that I liked best, of course, went to Broadway. Those 3 didn't get picked up.
Which were those?
The Mound Builders.
Oh, that was wonderful.
I love that play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful play.
Yeah, what's the best thing I've written? Well, no, Sympathetic Magic now is the best thing I've written, but it didn't move either. I don't remember the second one that didn't move. I try not to dwell on that.
This torrent that became, this trickle that became a torrent, changed the course of American theater. As far as I'm concerned, it certainly changed my life, because
you started writing, yeah.
I started writing again for Circle Rep, and where eventually I did As Is. my play
Also
As
one
Is.
of the best things that we ever did.
That was
Which
and-
also moved to Broadway.
which moved to Broadway, and
Well, by then it was a pattern.
Yeah.
Something at Circle Rep, you do something at Circle Rep, and it gets moved to either off Broadway or it
with the
has to run
connivance
longer.
of the Schuberts and
Yeah.
Lucille and that wonderful lady Lucille Lortel.
Lucille Ortel.
And so we're going to, I've been getting the high sign that we have to wrap up this part, and so it's good to end on this part with the triumph of Lanford Wilson and the Circle Rep. And I'm looking forward to reconnecting with you about the rest of your career and
That
your
might be
thinking.
interesting, yeah.
And
Why not?
I wanted to thank you and our studio and our home audience for joining us today, and I hope you join us next time. Thank you very much for watching Conversations and
Thank you
participating.
for having me, Bill.